I started by modeling Grim's skull by making a shape that looks like his skull. Then I add a subdivision modifier and start to sculpt it. My only problem here was that I wasn't decided if I want to make his looks more like in the cartoon or his variant from the game Fusion 4, cause I really like the way he looks in the game, but I feel like he doesn't really look like him if he doesn't have his iconic Giga Chad jaw, so I'm gonna choose the middle way and make a semi-realistic skull with an oversized jaw. That should work just fine. So far so good. The next thing I want to add is the possibility to move his jaw. For some reasons, I modeled these connectors and overlapped them with his jaw. Then I duplicate them, scale them up just a bit, and use the new model to make a socket in his skull. The socket needs to be a bit bigger to be sure it will properly fit after I print the parts. Good. Now I'm gonna make him a robe by adding a cube and then try to make a shape that will somehow look like a robe. After that, I remesh it and I sculpt it until it started to look like it's supposed to. Make him a hoodie and some sleeves? Now it's done. For the next part I will have to retopologize the robe I just made. I can't just remesh it, cause I need to select the loops and straight lines around the model, and for that I will have to do it myself. It will not be the cleanest topology, cause I don't want to spend too much time on that part, but it will do the trick for what I need. I hope. Now that it's done, I will select the loops and edges that I consider it will make a good UV unwrap for what I need. And here's the thing. This is like the only method I could think of. I couldn't find anything else on the internet to help. Surprisingly, people don't use 3D software to design clothes. At least they don't create an outline of the model for sewing real cloth pieces. You see, tailors work with measurements to make clothes. And I'm not a tailor, so I will have to do this in my way. The problem with my method here is that it's pretty much depending on how good I selected the seams edges. And I already can tell that these shoulders will not look like this model at all. But anyway, I will add a new material and make a new texture for the model. Connect the new texture to the material. Now I'm ready to paint the texture. If I paint on the model, it will paint on the texture exactly where the UVs are. And that will work faster if I choose a bigger brush size. Now all I have to do is save the texture, add it on this site. That will convert my PNG image into an SVG format. That will basically let me convert a 2D image into a 3D model. Kinda. First, I need to import the SVG file in Blender. So I'm gonna select the curves I don't need, delete them, select what it remains, and convert it to a mesh. If you paid attention, you can see that what I have here now, it's not having exactly the same shape as it's supposed to. Maybe if I had choose a higher resolution, or at least places more distance between the UVs, I will have end up with a more accurate result. But I will repair it later. For now I'm more interested in scaling the thing to a correct size. I can use the measurement tool in Blender to measure the size of the square on the robe, and the same square of the 3D UV I just made. Speaking of measurements, I need to determine the size of my model for 3D printing. And apparently Blender shows me the size in meters, but if I export it in Cura, it shows me the same value but in centimeters. I try to change the value in Blender, but that will just move the point to the left or right, so I'm just gonna pretend that this value, it's actually centimeters. Problem solved. For his arms I come with this design, ball and donut connectors. Want it to be not too rigid yet not too flexible. I also wanted to try this design which I seen while I was scrolling designs for ball connectors, and I say to give it a chance. What I didn't realize is that my model is quite small, and that piece will be even smaller than I was anticipated. And after I printed the pieces, of course the one I was most afraid of snapped while I was removing the supports. So I continue with my original idea, and I think the donut-like shape is the best option here. Also, it reminds me a bit of Lego Hero Factory. Man, I love those toys, but always I will have one piece that will break. If that happen now, I can just print another piece. No problemo. So far so good. The new design, it's looking pretty well. I was too afraid that I'm gonna break the pieces while I was removing the supports, because to remove them I also need to bend those donuts rings. And to my surprise, I managed to remove all the supports without breaking the pieces. Until I get to the shoulder part where I got too confident on myself and snap it. So I had to print another one. That somehow failed printing. But the next one was printed just right, and I didn't break it this time. Now I had to repair the rope shape guide I just made earlier, and for doing so I need to use the knife tool and guess where should I cut to give the model a more accurate shape. Just cut, select faces, delete, and then repeat. Okay, I'm going to make him his side, beginning with a cylinder and then working on his fingers. I need him to hold a good grip on this stick. Also, I need to be sure this toothpick it will fit perfectly in his hand, cause when I will print these parts, they will be printed a bit thicker than they are in the 3D universe. Now for the real thing, I wanted to do it with a sharp edge and a pointy peak, but then I realized that it will probably won't print very well. And then I will have to sanding it, so to make my life easier and safer, I decided to let the edges flatten thick. To model Billy wasn't that hard, except that he in cartoon have a small body and a big head, and I wanted to give my model some proportions that will resemble with something more natural, I guess. Again, I really like how some models look in Fusion Fall, including Billy, but my Billy has to be a kid, not a teenager, so I will stick with the dwarfish appearance for now. Now I have to export each model I want to be printed one by one. And it's way faster if I just make a shortcut to export the models in STL format. All I had to do now is line up the models, and surprisingly, every part from Billy that's not his head or his body had enough place here. I also selected the setting to print the pieces one by one. I covered Billy's cap with an acrylic adhesive to fill the gaps, then I sanding it. Now it's time for a bit of restoration, and for that I wanted to use some air dry clay, but all I could find was some eye clay though, which looks like chewed gum. But I remember that I used that like 15 years ago, and I know that when it gets dry, it has a texture like some kind of gummy rubber. I cut a small piece of clay and tried to stick it on the eyebrow. Okay, it's definitely not sticking well on the plastic surface. After it decided to stick, I shape it a bit with my favorite silicone tool and proceed to fill the gaps on Billy's ears as well. And I covered the clay with super glue for protection. I didn't want to keep the hair model on his head, cause I thought it will not print very well. Instead, I prefer to sculpt his hair with some eye clay. After I finish, I glue the hair and cap on his head, and I covered his hair with super glue for protection, cause we all know that super glue is the best hair gel if you want results. I also glued the sides, and I covered Billy's and Mandy's pieces with primer filler, and now the pieces are ready to be painted. I don't really like how Mandy's hand looks here, so I'm gonna sanding it and paint it again. I never thought that I would have to use a shaping tool for acrylic paint, but here I am. To be honest, after the paint dried a bit, that tool is pretty effective. Now I just need to glue the pieces together. And I decided to sanding a bit because she doesn't have much balance. After I painted the side, I masked it with some paper tape, but I was afraid it will stick too well and peel the paint when I will remove the tape, so I adjusted the thickness of the tape with some dust. And now that it can barely stick to something, I mummified the piece and now it's ready to be painted. And I used an universal matte varnish spray to protect the paint. And now it's time to make the robe. I used to make my own plushies when I was 9 years old, and now I'm 22, and I haven't really sewed since then. My grandma was a professional tailor, and she teaches me a bunch of things that helped me only like 2 times until now. It would have been easier if I used a sewing machine, and my grandmother had an old sewing machine that she modified every time something broke in it, and she's the only person who knows how to use it. And unless I have a Ouija board, I don't think I'm gonna discover how to use it. I really didn't want to use super glue here, but I had no choice because the sleeves are too small and I don't think I could have sewed them properly. Look at that. It looks like Eustace from Cowardly Dog. After I cut some imperfections, I prepared my favorite tools and begin to sanding it. I also made another skull with some more expressions, and then begin the assemble. And the figurines are done! I'm really happy about the results, they look really good. Especially Mandy. She looks amazing. I think it's the best figurine I made so far. She's just perfect. Also, Billy turned out pretty well, considering that his model in Blender looked a bit like Mr. Potato from Toy Story. I like that he can rotate his arms, and that's interesting. Really like it. Look at that. He wants to hug Grim. Did Grim want a hug? I love it. I also can remove his nose and rip his legs from his body. And I can also rotate his head. And if you like it and want to see me how I create more stuff, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, a comment, and maybe share that video to be seen by many people. And we will see you next time. Bye bye!